Hello, my dear creative friend. Today we are reading from my favorite book of all times, and that is Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky. Of course, you know, because I might have mentioned it before, and also you have seen the thumbnail. That is why we are here. I have selected a paragraph to read from this book, and I hope that you will enjoy this absolutely brilliant writer's way of putting things together and constructing this scene and taking us further into the novel with the idea that he has set out. It's just brilliantly written. Enjoy it. He had not far to go. He knew indeed how many steps it was from the gate of his lodging house, exactly 730. He had counted them once when he had been lost in dreams. At the time he had put no faith in those dreams and was only tantalizing himself by their hideous but daring recklessness. Now, a month later, he had begun to look upon them differently, and in spite of the monologues in which he jeered at his own impotence and indecision, he had involuntarily come to regard this hideous dream as an exploit to be attempted, although he still did not realize this himself. He was positively going now for a rehearsal of this project, and at every step his excitement grew more and more violent. With a sinking heart and a nervous tremor, he went up to a huge house which on one side looked onto the canal and on the other onto the street. This house was let out in tiny tenements and was inhabited by working people of all kinds, tailors, locksmiths, cooks, Germans of all sorts, girls picking up a living as best they could, petty clerks, etc. There was a continual coming and going through the two gates and in the two courtyards of the house. 3 of 4 doorkeepers were employed on the building. The young man was very glad to meet none of them, and at once slipped unnoticed through the door on the right and up the staircase. It was a black staircase, dark and narrow, but he was familiar with it already and knew his way, and he liked all these surroundings. In such darkness, even the most inquisitive eyes were not to be dreaded. If I'm so scared now, what would it be if it somehow came to pass that I were really going to do it? He could not help asking himself as he reached the 4th story. There, his progress was barred by some porters who were engaging in moving furniture out of a flat. He knew that the flat had been occupied by a German clerk in the civil service and his family. This German was moving out then, so the 4th floor on this staircase would be untenanted except by the old woman. That's a good thing anyway, he thought to himself as he rang the bell of the old woman's flat. The bell gave a faint tinkle, as though it were made of tin and not of copper. The little flats in such houses always have bells that ring like that. He had forgotten the note of that bell, and now its peculiar tinkle seemed to remind him of something and to bring it clearly before him. He started. His nerves were terribly overstrained by now. In a little while, the door was open a tiny crack. The old woman eyed her visitor with evident distrust through the crack, and nothing could be seen but her little eyes glittering in the darkness. But seeing a number of people on the landing, she grew bolder and opened the door wide. The young man stepped into the dark entry, which was partitioned off from the tiny kitchen. The old woman stood facing him in silence and looking inquiringly at him. She was a diminutive, withered-up old woman of 60, with sharp, malignant eyes and a sharp little nose. Her colorless, somewhat grizzled hair was thickly smeared with oil, and she wore no kerchief over it. Round her thin long neck, which looked like a hen's leg, was knotted some sort of flannel rag, and in spite of the heat, there hung flapping on her shoulders a mangy fur cape, yellow with age. The old woman coughed and groaned at every instant. The young man must have looked at her with a rather peculiar expression, for a gleam of mistrust came into her eyes again. "Raskolnikov, a student. I came here a month ago," the young man made haste to mutter, with a half bow, remembering that he ought to be more polite. "I remember, my good sir. I remember quite well your coming here," the old woman said distinctly, still keeping her inquiring eyes on his face. "And here I'm again on the same errand," Raskolnikov continued, a little disconcerted and surprised at the old woman's mistrust. "Perhaps she was always like that, though, only I did not notice it the other time," he thought with an uneasy feeling. The old woman paused, as though hesitating, then stepped on one side, and, pointing to the door of the room, she said, letting her visitor pass in front of her, "Step in, my good sir." The little room into which the young man walked, with yellow paper on the walls, geraniums and muslin curtains in the windows, was brightly lighted up at that moment by the setting sun. "So the sun will shine like this then, too," flashed as it were by chance through Raskolnikov's mind, and with a rapid glance he scanned everything in the room, trying as far as possible to notice and remember its arrangement. But there was nothing special in the room. The furniture, all very old, of yellow wood, consisted of a sofa with a huge bent wooden back, an oval table in front of the sofa, a dressing table with a looking glass fixed on it between the windows, chairs along the walls, and 2 or 3 halfpenny prints in yellow frames, representing German damsels with birds in their hands. That was all. In the corner, a light was burning before a small icon. Everything was very clean. The floor and the furniture were brightly polished. Everything shone. Lizaveta's work, thought the young man. There was not a speck of dust to be seen in the whole flat. It's in the houses of spiteful old widows that one finds such cleanliness, Raskolnikov thought again, and he stole a curious glance at the cotton curtain over the door leading into another tiny room in which stood the old woman's bed and chest of drawers, and into which he had never looked before. These 2 rooms made up the whole flat. "What do you want?" the old woman said severely, coming into the room and, as before, standing in front of him so as to look him straight in the face. "I've brought something to pawn here," and he drew out of his pocket an old-fashioned flat silver watch, on the back of which was engraved a globe. The chain was of steel. "But the time is up for your last pledge. The month was up the day before yesterday. I will bring you the interest for another month. Wait a little." "But that's for me to do as I please, my good sir, to wait or to sell your pledge at once." "How much will you give me for the watch, Alyona Ivanovna?" "You come with such trifles, my good sir. It's scarcely worth anything. I gave you 2 rubles last time for your ring, and one could buy it quite new at a jeweler's for 1.5 rubles. Give me 4 rubles for it. I shall redeem it. It was my father's. I shall be getting some money soon. 1.5 rubles and interest in advance, if you like." 1.5 rubles, cried the young man. "Please yourself," and the old woman handed him back the watch. The young man took it and was angry that he was on the point of going away, but checked himself at once, remembering that there was nowhere else he could go, and that he had another object also in coming. "Hand it over," he said roughly. The old woman fumbled in her pocket for her keys and disappeared behind the curtain into the other room. The young man, left standing alone in the middle of the room, listened inquisitively, thinking. He could hear her unlocking the chest of drawers. "It must have the top drawer," he reflected. "So she carries the keys in a pocket on the right, all of the bunch on a steel ring. And there's one key there, 3 times as big as all the others, with deep notches. That can be the key of the chest of drawers. Then there must be some other chest or strong box. That's worth knowing. Strong boxes always have keys like that. But how degrading it all is." The old woman came back. "Here, sir. As we say, 10 kopecks the ruble a month, so I must take 15 kopecks from 1.5 rubles for the month in advance. But for the 2 rubles I lent you before, you owe me now 20 kopecks of the same reckoning in advance. That makes 35 kopecks altogether. So I must give you 1.15 rubles for the watch. Here it is." "What? Only 1.15 rubles now?" "Just so." The young man did not dispute it and took the money. He looked at the old woman and was in no hurry to get away, as though there was still something he wanted to say or to do, but he still did not himself quite know what. "I may be bringing you something else in a day or 2, Alyona Ivanovna. A valuable thing, silver, a cigarette box. As soon as I get it back from a friend." He broke off in conclusion. "Well, we will talk about it then, sir. Goodbye. Are you always at home alone? Your sister is not here with you?" He asked as casually as possible as he went out into the passage. "What business is she of yours, my good sir?" "Oh, nothing particular. I simply asked. You are too quick. Good day, Alyona Ivanovna." Raskolnikov went out in complete confusion. This confusion became more and more intense. As he went on down the stairs, he even stopped short 2 or 3 times, as though suddenly struck by some thought. When he was in the street, he cried out, "Oh God, how loathsome is all this!" And can I possibly? No, it's nonsense, it's rubbish, he added resolutely. And how could such an atrocious thing come into my head? What filthy things my heart is capable of. Yes, filthy above all, disgusting, loathsome, loathsome. And for a whole month I've been, but no words, no exclamations could express his agitation. The feeling of intense repulsion which had begun to oppress and torture his heart while he was on his way to the old woman had by now reached such a pitch and had taken such a definite form that he did not know what to do with himself to escape from his wretchedness. He walked along the pavement like a drunken man, regardless of the passers-by and jostling against them, and only came to his senses when he was in the next street.